The night was silent except for the hum of rain against the tall windows of the Carlisle penthouse overlooking Manhattan. Inside, soft golden light spilled across marble floors polished to a mirror shine, yet the air felt colder than the storm outside. Amara Johnson stood in the hallway, her breath caught in her chest as she pressed herself against the wall, listening to the voices coming from her husband's private study. Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach, still flat beneath her silk blouse, though she knew the miracle growing inside her. Two small lives, two tiny heartbeats was real. Tomorrow night, Ethan Carlisle's voice carried with the easy arrogance of a man who'd never known defeat. I'll make the announcement at the gala. Everyone will finally see what she is, a desperate woman who has nothing without me. Then I'll introduce Charlotte as my fiancée. The timing will be perfect. A laugh followed, low, cruel, and foreign to her ears. It was the sound of a man she realized she had never truly known. Amara's heart hammered. Charlotte. His new fiancée. Her mind flashed to the elegant ivory invitation she had helped him address only days ago, believing the gala was to celebrate their marriage, their life, their shared accomplishments. She had carefully chosen her emerald gown, imagining Ethan's proud eyes on her as they renewed their vows in front of New York's elite. Instead, he had planned her public ruin. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but she kept her body perfectly still. Ethan's voice poured through the door like venom. She still believes it's a vow renewal, he continued smugly. That's the beauty of it. 3 years of marriage, and she still hasn't figured out that her only worth was being a pretty ornament while I built Carlisle Development into an empire. Amara's chest ached as if struck. She had been the mind behind that empire. Every innovative design, every eco-smart blueprint, every sustainable development deal that had catapulted Carlisle Development into the headlines, they had been hers. Her brilliance, her sleepless nights. Ethan had worn her work like a tailored suit, never once acknowledging that it was she who had stitched every seam. She has no money, no family influence, no power without me, Ethan said with chilling certainty. When I announce Charlotte, Amara will crumble. Begging in front of everyone, it will be a show worth remembering. The words were carved into Amara's soul like glass. Yet even as pain threatened to consume her, a strange calm settled over her spirit. If Ethan thought she would collapse into tears before the city's elite, he had gravely underestimated her. She pressed both palms against her stomach, feeling the faintest flutter of life within. No, she whispered silently to her children. You will not see your mother broken. You will see her rise. Steeling herself, she slipped quietly back to her own office, a sanctuary Ethan had rarely bothered to enter. There, among the drafting tables and sketches of projects the world believed belonged to her husband, Amara's resolve solidified into steel. She opened the hidden drawer of her mahogany desk and withdrew a folder she had been building for years, almost by instinct, designs, patents, licensing, contracts, and bank statements from her private account in Switzerland. She had once saved them not out of distrust, but as a professional habit. Tonight she saw them for what they truly were, the foundation of Ethan Carlisle's destruction. For a fleeting moment, tears threatened blurring her vision. She had loved him, sacrificed for him, believed in him. But the man behind that door was no husband, no partner. He was an enemy wearing a familiar face. She whispered into the stillness, her voice trembling yet fierce. You thought you married a woman to control. Instead, you married the one who built your kingdom. And tomorrow, Ethan, I will show you exactly how fragile your throne really is. The rain outside intensified, beating against the glass like a warning drum. Amara sat down at her desk, booted up her secured laptop, and began making the calls that would change everything. By dawn, her patents would be safely under her own name. By evening, the contracts proving Ethan's theft would be in her attorney's hands. By tomorrow night, Ethan Carlisle would learn that the woman he dismissed as a decorative nobody was in truth the architect of his rise and the author of his fall. She reached again for her stomach, her touch tender, as she felt the lives within her respond, as if they too sensed the storm. You will never grow up believing your mother was weak, she promised softly. You will see her strength. You will inherit her fire. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky, and in that thunder, Amara heard the echo of her own rebirth. Tomorrow, the world would watch Ethan Carlisle try to destroy her. Tomorrow, they would witness him destroy himself instead. My dear friends, if Amara's strength in the face of betrayal has touched your heart, let's build this journey together. Share your thoughts below. Your words truly matter. Tap like if you believe in the power of resilience, and follow so you won't miss what happens when Amara steps into the gala tomorrow night. This is only the beginning. The city was still asleep when the first traces of pale light brushed the horizon, painting Manhattan in shades of silver and rose. Amara Johnson had not slept. She had spent the long hours of the night alone in her office, surrounded by sketches, contracts, and memories that felt more like ghosts than triumphs. Her reflection in the window startled her. Dark curls framed a face that seemed both fragile and unyielding. Her deep brown eyes shadowed with fatigue, yet alight with a steady flame. She did not look like a woman about to collapse under betrayal. She looked like a woman ready to rise from it. On the drafting table before her lay the evidence of 3 years' labor. Ethan Carlisle had stood on the shoulders of her genius, basked in applause for innovations that had poured from her sleepless nights, her relentless vision. Every soaring tower, every sustainable design that had made Carlisle Development a name, whispered with reverence among investors, it was hers, and he had planned to throw her away. The realization should have shattered her. It nearly did. For hours she sat motionless, staring at the delicate lines of the Morrison Center blueprint, the very design that had won Ethan the city's most lucrative development contract. She remembered the thrill she had felt the night she perfected its energy-efficient glass integration system. She remembered slipping into their shared bed that night, believing she was building a future for both of them. A bitter smile touched her lips. She had been building a future, yes, just not for the man she thought she loved. Her phone buzzed softly on the desk. A message from Maya Torres, her longtime friend and attorney, glowed across the screen. If you're ready, we can move forward. You're not alone in this, Amara. Her fingers hovered over the reply. How strange she thought that a single decision could divide a life so cleanly into before and after. Before she had been Ethan's wife, the woman who laughed easily, who believed love was enough. After she was something new, someone forged from betrayal, someone who would never again mistake manipulation for devotion. She typed back, I'm ready. Closing her eyes, Amara leaned back in her chair, hands cradling the secret lives within her. The twins. They were the reason she could not crumble. The reason was that she had to transform pain into resolve. She wanted her sons or daughters, perhaps, to grow up knowing their mother had never surrendered her dignity. She wanted them to see that even in the face of cruelty, strength could shine more brilliantly than despair. Her thoughts drifted backward to her childhood on Chicago's South Side, where her mother Lorraine had worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Lorraine had always told her, "Baby, the world won't hand you respect. You'll have to build it yourself." Amara had carried those words through architecture school, through endless nights in design labs, through the battles to be seen and heard in a field that rarely made space for women who looked like her. She had built respect, and Ethan had tried to claim it as his own. A sharp pang of memory pierced her, his first words to her, years ago when she was a young architect presenting her concept for a sustainable urban renewal project. He had looked at her with admiration then, or so she believed, saying, "You see the city not for what it is, but for what it could become." She had fallen in love with that vision, with the illusion of a man who understood her dreams. But illusions, like poorly built towers, always collapse under pressure. Amara rose from her chair and crossed to the window. The skyline stretched endlessly before her, steel and glass catching the dawn. It no longer looked like a monument to Ethan's power. It looked like a canvas waiting for her hand. She whispered into the stillness, "You thought I was your shadow, but I am the architect of the light." With deliberate calm, she gathered the folder of documents, each page a weapon sharpened, not with malice, but with truth. She slipped them into her leather briefcase and locked it shut. The sound was decisive, final. Her body was tired, but her spirit pulsed with new clarity. The betrayal had cut deep, yes, but it had also stripped away every illusion. She was not Ethan's ornament, not his charity case, not a woman to be discarded at his whim. She was Amara Johnson, the woman who had turned his family's struggling business into a titan, the woman carrying the next generation within her, the woman who would no longer hide her brilliance for anyone's comfort. She thought of Ethan's smug voice behind the study door, predicting she would beg. Let him think it. Let him prepare for a performance that would never come. Tomorrow night, under the glittering chandeliers of the gala, he would face not the broken wife he expected, but the woman he had underestimated for too long. And when she stepped into that room, he would finally see the truth: some women are not meant to be rescued because they were never truly in danger. They were sharpening their wings, waiting for the moment to rise. Amara rested her hand gently on her stomach once more. You'll see, she whispered to her children. Your mother will show you what it means to fight with grace, to win with dignity, and to walk away stronger than ever. The sun broke fully over the horizon, flooding the room with gold. And in that golden light, Amara felt the first stirrings of something she thought she had lost forever: hope. Tomorrow, Ethan Carlisle's empire would begin to crumble, and tomorrow Amara Johnson would begin to reign. The Metropolitan Museum glittered like a jewel against the night sky, its steps alive with a stream of Manhattan's elite. Black limousines purred to a stop along the curb, releasing women draped in silk and diamonds, men in crisp tuxedos, whose smiles concealed calculations sharper than any blade. Inside, the grand hall had been transformed into a dream of gold and crystal chandeliers spilling light over polished marble floors, as a string quartet whispered melodies of elegance and expectation. The guests came not for art, nor even for charity, but for the spectacle whispered about in every corner of high society: Ethan Carlisle's celebration of love. They arrived eager for drama, their hearts beating not with kindness, but with anticipation of scandal. Amara Johnson stood at the top of the museum's marble staircase, her emerald gown flowing like liquid over her curves, her shoulders squared in quiet defiance. The diamond earrings that had once felt like a gift of devotion now glimmered like armor against the eyes that turned toward her. Her hair was swept into an elegant chignon, every strand in place, as though nothing in her world had shifted. But everything had. As her heels clicked against the stone steps, conversations faltered, eyes widened. She could feel their gazes, heavy and curious, scanning her for cracks, for the weakness they believed Ethan's betrayal had carved into her. Yet Amara walked with the serene grace of a queen returning to claim her throne. Every step measured, every breath a silent vow. She caught sight of Ethan across the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, his features cut from the kind of marble sculptors envied. He looked every inch the golden heir. At his side stood Charlotte Whitmore, the daughter of an old banking dynasty, her pale gown clinging like a promise of purity. Charlotte's smile was the polished weapon of someone who believed victory had already been secured. Amara's lips curved, not in warmth, but in something far sharper. Victory, she knew, had a way of shifting hands when truth entered the room. Darling, you look radiant, purred Vivian Carlisle, Ethan's mother, as she drifted toward Amara in a gown heavy with sapphires. The older woman's eyes glinted like frost, her words wrapped in sweetness, but sharpened by disdain. What a lovely surprise. I admit I wasn't sure you'd be strong enough to attend tonight. Amara's smile was calm, unshaken. Oh, I wouldn't dream of missing such an important evening. I imagine it will be unforgettable. Something in her tone made Vivian pause, her confidence flickering like a candle caught in a sudden breeze. But Amara glided away before the older woman could decipher the warning. The ballroom hummed with the undercurrent of expectation. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of champagne, their movements precise, their eyes averted. The orchestra swelled as Ethan mounted the dais, the picture of command. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice rang out smooth and commanding. Thank you for joining me this evening. Tonight marks a new chapter, not only in my life, but in the legacy of Carlisle development. 3 years ago, I made choices that I thought were right. Tonight I stand before you to correct them. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Amara stood within full view, her posture regal, her chin tilted just so her expression unreadable. Ethan's gaze sought her, his lips curving in a smile others mistook for tenderness. She recognized it for what it was: calculated cruelty. He wanted her eyes wet with tears, her body trembling with shame. He wanted her broken so he could savor the spectacle of her collapse. He turned slightly, extending a hand toward Charlotte. "It is my honor to introduce to you the woman who will soon stand at my side as my wife, Charlotte Whitmore." Gasps sliced through the ballroom. Charlotte stepped forward, luminous and victorious, her smile gleaming as though the world already belonged to her. The audience leaned forward, hungry for the moment they believed was coming, the moment when Amara Johnson, the nobody who had dared to climb into their world, would shatter publicly. Amara did not shatter. She did not falter, did not reach for a chair to steady herself, did not let a single tear fall. Instead, she lifted her chin, her spine as straight as the towers she had designed, her emerald gown, catching the light in a shimmer that seemed almost otherworldly. As she stepped forward, the crowd's murmur fell into silence. The sound of her heels against marble echoed like a drum beat, commanding every eye, every breath. The sea of faces parted, as if compelled, stunned by the quiet force of her presence. Ethan's smug smile faltered. This was not the script he had written. Amara ascended the platform without invitation, her grace so absolute that Ethan, startled, stepped aside as if yielding to her rightful place. She extended her hand, and without thinking, he surrendered the microphone. The crowd inhaled as one. She held it gently like silk wrapped around steel. Then she smiled a smile radiant enough to bend the air itself, and the ballroom trembled with the shift of power. "Well," Amara said softly, her voice carrying like music through the stunned silence. "What perfect timing, Ethan." Her words glided across the room, wrapping themselves around every ear, every heart. Charlotte's confident smile cracked at the edges. Vivian's eyes narrowed, her poise shaken. And Ethan, for the first time that night, looked uncertain. In that moment, Amara Johnson was no longer the betrayed wife they had come to pity. She was something far greater, an architect not only of buildings, but of destiny itself. And tomorrow the world would know it. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Chandeliers glittered above like constellations, their light refracting off crystal flutes and polished marble. Yet no one moved. Hundreds of eyes trained on Amara Johnson followed her every step, as though the laws of gravity themselves had shifted, and she alone dictated their pull. She stood at the center of the dais, now the microphone steady in her hand, her emerald gown flowing behind her like a banner of triumph. Her gaze swept the room, poised, unhurried, commanding silence without raising her voice. "Ethan," she began, her tones smooth as velvet, yet carrying the weight of steel, "your timing truly is exquisite, because I too have an announcement to make." A ripple of confusion crossed the crowd. Ethan's jaw tightened, and the smirk he had worn only moments before faltered. Charlotte, poised at his side, clasped her hands too tightly, the confidence draining from her face. Vivian Carlyle leaned forward, her sapphire necklace catching the light, as if trying to hold on to the illusion of control. Amara allowed the pause to linger, drawing the audience deeper into her orbit. Then she turned her face toward the sea of expectant eyes and smiled a smile that glowed with serenity, though fire burned behind it. "I am carrying twins," she said clearly, each word deliberate, ringing through the cavernous hall with the resonance of truth. "Ethan's children." The silence that followed was profound. It was not the hush of mere surprise, it was the kind of silence that descends when an entire world tilts off its axis. Gasps echoed sharp and jagged, breaking the stillness like cracks through ice. Glasses trembled in hands that only moments ago had been eager for gossip. Ethan's face drained of color. The carefully crafted narrative of his control crumbled with a single revelation. The heir to Carlisle Development abandoning his pregnant wife publicly before the city's most powerful witnesses, this was no scandal to savor. This was a ruin. But Amara was not finished. She turned slowly toward him, her eyes unflinching, her voice gentle yet lethal. And since my dear husband has chosen to make his declaration so beautifully and so publicly, I will do the same. Ethan Carlisle, tonight before all who stand here, I ask for a divorce. A collective murmur surged through the crowd as though the air itself had turned electric. Amara raised her hand, and with that simple gesture silence fell once more. The authority in her presence was undeniable sovereign. You see, she continued, her gaze sweeping across the room. Ethan believed that I would beg, that I would crumble at the loss of a man who thought so little of me. But I do not beg, and I do not break. Her eyes fixed on Ethan, who stood frozen, his confidence eroded to dust. For 3 years, I gave him my brilliance, my loyalty, my love, and in return, he gave me betrayal. Every design you've applauded as Carlisle Development's triumph, every innovation you've admired was mine. My sketches, my patents, my sleepless nights. While Ethan basked in applause, I built the empire you so admire. Charlotte's perfect smile shattered completely. Vivian's lips parted, words dying in her throat as the magnitude of Amara's revelation unfurled like a storm. Amara reached for the diamond ring on her finger, twisting it free with calm deliberation. She placed it on the edge of the microphone stand, the small circle of light catching every eye. "Congratulations on your engagement, Ethan," she said, her smile radiant and devastating. "I hope you and Charlotte find happiness in each other. You'll need it, because when my lawyers finish presenting the evidence of your theft, a felony, I might add, you will have nothing left. Not your company, not your fortune, not even the illusion of honor." The weight of her words hung heavy in the hushed air. Ethan's lips moved as though to speak, but no sound came. The great Ethan Carlisle silenced before the very crowd he had invited to witness her downfall. Amara stepped closer, her voice soft now, intimate enough that it carried like a confession to every corner of the ballroom. "You called me a charity case, a social climber. You thought I was climbing toward your world. But Ethan," her smile deep and fierce with truth, "I was never climbing. I was building. And you were too arrogant to see that you stood on my foundation." With a final glance at the stunned crowd, Amara turned and began her descent from the platform. Each step echoed with regal certainty, her gown trailing behind, like the wake of a ship cutting through turbulent waters. The murmurs swelled into a frenzy as she crossed the ballroom, her dignity untouched, her power undeniable. At the threshold of the great doors, she paused, turning back only once her eyes locked with Ethan's. "Don't worry about the twins," she said, her voice clear and resolute. "They will grow up strong, loved, and unbroken, and they will never need a father who believed destroying their mother was entertainment." Then she walked into the night, leaving behind not a woman scorned, but a woman reborn. The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps, their hungry fascination now fixed not on Ethan Carlisle's new fiancée, but on the woman who had rewritten the narrative in a single, unforgettable stroke. For Ethan, it had been meant as the grandest triumph of his life. For Amara, it was merely the beginning. The city awoke the next morning to headlines that burned brighter than the rising sun. Newspapers splashed Amara's radiant smile across their front pages, her emerald gown immortalized in glossy photographs. "Carlisle Empire shaken as wife reveals twins, demands divorce at Gala." The words rippled through Manhattan's social circles like a shockwave, unraveling Ethan's carefully woven image in a single night. But for Amara Johnson, the storm had only just begun. She sat in Maya Torres's office that morning, the steady hum of traffic outside muffled by the thick glass windows. The room smelled faintly of cedar and ink, comforting in its seriousness. Amara's hands rested protectively over her stomach, as if shielding her unborn children from the chaos she had unleashed. "You were extraordinary," Maya said, sliding a thick folder across the mahogany desk. The attorney's eyes, sharp and unyielding, softened as they met Amara's. "But now comes the part that matters even more. It's time to show the world the truth." Amara opened the folder, the weight of its contents pressing against her fingertips. Inside lay the evidence she had quietly gathered for years: architectural blueprints, patent registrations, confidential emails, licensing agreements worth millions. Each page bore her signature, her ideas, her genius. each page a dagger aimed squarely at Ethan Carlisle's empire. "They'll call me vindictive," Amara murmured, tracing a finger over a design she had sketched long before Ethan presented it as his own. "They'll say I humiliated him out of spite." "Let them talk," Maya replied firmly. "The documents speak louder than gossip. This isn't vengeance, Amara, it's justice." Justice! The word curled inside Amara like a flame. She thought of her mother's calloused hands working double shifts, of the professors who had doubted her, of the countless late nights she had sacrificed so Ethan could bask in her achievements. She had not come this far to remain invisible. Maya leaned forward. "I've already scheduled a press briefing. We'll release the patents, the licensing contracts, and the Swiss account records. The narrative will be clear: Ethan Carlisle built his empire on theft." Amara closed the folder, her jaw set. "Then let the world see the man he truly is." By evening, the news cycle had turned into a frenzy. Images of the Morrison Center lit up television screens' anchors, announcing that the groundbreaking sustainable cooling system, hailed as Ethan's visionary contribution, had in fact been patented months earlier by Amara Johnson. Architectural Digest issued a statement praising her brilliance, while industry leaders publicly distanced themselves from Carlisle development. At a hastily arranged press conference, Amara stepped to the podium, her presence calm yet magnetic. Cameras clicked like rapid heartbeats as she faced the crowd. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady, woven with quiet strength. "For years I remained silent while my work was presented under another's name. I did so because I believed in love and loyalty, in the promise of partnership. But silence in the face of theft is no longer loyalty, it is surrender. And I do not surrender." Gasps rippled through the room as she laid out the evidence piece by piece. The patents bearing her name, the licensing fees flowing into her private account, the correspondence proving Ethan's role had been presentation, not creation. "I am not here to destroy a man," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "I am here to reclaim what is mine, and to ensure that my children grow up knowing their mother stood tall when others tried to silence her." The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then swelling, rising like a tide. For the first time, Amara felt the weight of invisibility begin to lift. Across the city, Ethan watched from the shadows of his penthouse, the glass of scotch in his hand trembling. His phone buzzed relentlessly, calls from investors, withdrawing support from partners, demanding answers from his mother's icy fury. Charlotte had already disappeared into the night, her name suddenly absent from every whisper of high society. Vivian Carlisle stormed into the room, her face ashen. "You promised," she'd begged, she spat. Ethan said nothing. The screen before him replayed Amara's calm, commanding words on an endless loop. The woman he had dismissed as dependent, powerless, replaceable, she had just dismantled him with truth. Meanwhile, Amara returned to her modest apartment, exhaustion pressing against her bones, yet her spirit unbroken. She sank onto the sofa, one hand on her stomach. The twins fluttered gently as though reminding her they too had felt the shift. She whispered into the quiet, "You see, my loves, we are not victims of betrayal. We are authors of our own story. And tonight the world finally read my name." For Amara, the counterstrike was not complete vengeance. It was the unveiling of her true self. She had been hidden too long in the shadows of Ethan Carlisle's empire. Now she stepped into her own light, radiant and unafraid. And though the storm around her had only begun, Amara knew with certainty Ethan had underestimated the wrong woman. The days that followed were a blur of flashing cameras, relentless phone calls, and the endless hum of a city drunk on scandal. Amara Johnson's name was on every tongue, from the polished lips of television anchors to the whispered gossip of women sipping champagne in uptown salons. But fame, she discovered, was a double-edged sword. For every article praising her courage, another questioned her motives. Some called her a trailblazer, a woman who had shattered the chains of a gilded prison. Others, spurred on by Ethan's powerful allies, painted her as manipulative, claiming she had planned the entire spectacle for personal gain. Amara bore it all with the same quiet grace she had carried onto the gala stage. Yet in the stillness of her nights, when the city's clamor fell away, the weight of it pressed against her chest. She would rest her hands on her swelling stomach and whisper to her unborn children, "I am strong enough for all of us. You will never see me falter." But her body, burdened by both pregnancy and stress, betrayed the facade. It was late one evening when the first sharp pain struck a sudden, merciless wave that brought her to her knees in her apartment's quiet kitchen. She gripped the counter, breathless, her vision blurring, as fear sliced through her resolve. Within minutes, she was in the back of an ambulance, sirens wailing through the Manhattan night, the city's glittering towers blurring past the windows. The antiseptic brightness of the hospital replaced the warmth of her home. Dr. Elizabeth Crane, her obstetrician, spoke gently yet firmly as she examined her. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high, Amara. The stress is affecting the twins. You need complete rest. No more press briefings, no late-night calls with lawyers. If you want to carry them safely, you must let others fight some of these battles for you." Amara turned her face to the ceiling, her throat tight. Rest. How could she rest while Ethan still spun his lies, while Vivian Carlisle's whispers wound their way through society like poison? Yet when the monitor beside her bed picked up the rapid flutter of two small heartbeats, she knew she could not gamble with the lives within her. "I'll try," she whispered, though her eyes told Dr. Crane that surrender was not in her nature. Maya arrived the next morning, her arms full of files, her expression a blend of determination and concern. "You don't need to be in the courtroom for every deposition," she insisted, setting the folders on the bedside table. "I'll handle the details. Your job is to protect those babies." "I've spent years letting others present my work," Amara replied softly, brushing her hand over her stomach. "I won't let Ethan take even one more ounce of my voice." "Then lend me your voice," Maya said gently. "I'll carry it into every room until you're strong enough to stand beside me again." It was a compromise Amara hated, but one she knew she must make. For the first time in her life, the fight was not only hers, it belonged to Malik and Isaiah too, even if they had yet to draw their first breaths. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan Carlisle's empire crumbled like sandcastles against the tide. Investors withdrew one after another, scandalized by the evidence now flooding the public domain. Construction projects stalled, creditors demanded payments he could no longer provide, and his once loyal staff began leaking stories of his temper, his arrogance, his empty brilliance. In the Carlisle family estate, Vivian paced the drawing room, her sapphire necklace trembling against her collarbone. "Do something, Ethan," she hissed, her voice sharp with desperation. "She's destroying everything. Our name, our fortune, our legacy." Ethan stared blankly at the financial reports strewn across the mahogany table. The numbers were merciless. It was supposed to be her ruin, he muttered more to himself than to his mother. She was supposed to beg. She played you, Vivian spat, and now she'll bury you. He clenched his jaw, but for the first time in his life, he had no plan. Back in the hospital, Amara received daily bouquets from strangers, women she had never met who sent notes saying, "Thank you for standing for all of us who were silenced." Each message reminded her that her fight was larger than herself. She was no longer just Amara Johnson, the woman betrayed. She was becoming a symbol. Late one night, she lay awake listening to the twins' steady heartbeats on the monitor beside her. The sound was fragile yet fierce, like the rhythm of drums heralding a coming battle. She closed her eyes, exhaustion pressing against her, and whispered, "Your father thought he would end me. Instead, he taught me how strong I truly am. And when you are born, you will inherit that strength." The city outside glittered with its endless lights, but Amara no longer felt small beneath them. Even confined to a hospital bed, even as her body weakened, her spirit remained untouchable. Ethan Carlisle had unleashed the storm, but it would be Amara who rose from it unbroken and stronger than ever before. The courtroom smelled faintly of oak and history, a place where lives were dismantled and remade with words instead of weapons. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching dust motes that floated lazily above the rows of polished benches. For most, it was an ordinary Tuesday morning. For Amara Johnson, it was another battlefield in the war she had not chosen, but would not abandon. She sat at the plaintiff's table, her posture serene despite the storm that raged in the press outside. Her pregnancy was now unmistakable, her emerald dress tailored to drape elegantly over her growing form. Each time she rested her hand on her stomach, she felt the faintest movements of the children within, reminding her why she could not waver. Beside her, Maya Torres arranged a stack of documents with the precision of a general before a decisive campaign. "We're ready," Maya whispered, her eyes gleaming with determination. Across the aisle, Ethan Carlisle sat rigid, his once flawless suit creased from a restless night. The sheen of his confidence had dulled. The smirk he once wore like armor was gone. At his side, his high-priced attorney leaned close, whispering hurried strategies, but Ethan's eyes remained fixed on Amara. He had expected her to break. Yet here she was, poised, radiant, untouchable. When the judge entered the room, Rose, the trial began. The opening statements unfolded like carefully choreographed duels. Ethan's lawyer painted him as the visionary architect, the man whose genius had transformed Manhattan's skyline. He cast Amara as the dutiful wife, suggesting her claims were an attempt to seize power after a broken marriage. Amara did not flinch. She had anticipated the narrative. She had lived it. Then it was Maya's turn. Rising with calm authority, she placed her hand lightly on Amara's shoulder before stepping forward. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen," Maya began, her voice clear, "we will show you not just sketches, not just patents, but the very lifeblood of Carlisle development, every blueprint, every design, every innovation conceived not by Ethan Carlisle, but by the woman you see before you today. For years, she gave her brilliance in silence. Tonight, her silence ends." One by one, the evidence came forth. Patent certificates bearing Amara's name. Emails where Ethan had forwarded her designs, changing only the signature line. Contracts signed with investors, all referencing intellectual property protected under Amara's account in Switzerland. Whispers rippled through the courtroom as each exhibit was revealed. Ethan's mask of control cracked his jaw, tightening until the muscle in his cheek twitched visibly. When Amara finally took the stand, the room leaned into her words as if the very air hung on her testimony. She spoke not with bitterness, but with dignity of the night spent perfecting sustainable glass systems of the dream, to design cities that breathed of the love that once blinded her to the theft unfolding in her own home. "I believed in him," she said softly, her voice trembling only once. "I gave him not only my work, but my trust, and he repaid me with betrayal." The judge watched her intently, and for a moment the courtroom seemed to exist only for her truth. Ethan's cross-examination was ruthless. His lawyer pressed her with questions meant to belittle, to reduce her genius to the role of supportive wife. But Amara's answers were calm, unshaken, her eyes never leaving the attorneys. "Mrs. Johnson, surely your husband guided these projects." "No," Amara replied gently yet firmly. "He presented them. I built them. And you claim sole authorship of innovations worth billions." "I don't claim," she said, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. "I prove." Maya rose, placing the final piece of evidence before the court, a confidential recording of Ethan boasting at a private dinner, unaware the words would someday undo him. "She believes she's my partner. She doesn't know she's my tool. My empire is mine alone." The words hung in the air like poison, undeniable. Ethan's face drained of blood. By the time the judge called recess, the courtroom buzzed with energy. Reporters outside scrambled for headlines. Ethan sat, slumped, his gaze fixed on the polished wood of the defense table, no longer daring to meet Amara's eyes. In the quiet that followed, Maya leaned toward her. "You did it," she whispered. Amara closed her eyes briefly, exhaustion seeping into her bones. "No," she murmured, her hand brushing over the gentle swell of her stomach. "We did it. And this is only the beginning." Outside the courthouse, the city roared with speculation. Inside, Amara Johnson had taken her rightful place, not just as a betrayed wife, but as the visionary architect of her own destiny. And though the legal war was far from over, one truth had become undeniable. The empire Ethan Carlisle built was collapsing, and the foundation on which it had always stood was finally reclaiming its name. Winter's breath lingered over Manhattan, crisp and unyielding, as Amara Johnson lay in a hospital room, bathed in the gentle glow of dawn. Snow dusted the city outside, muting the sharp angles of steel and glass, as if the world itself had softened in anticipation. Inside monitors hummed softly, their steady rhythm echoing the two heartbeats she had carried so faithfully for 9 long months. Exhaustion clung to her like a second skin, her body strong and unyielding through battles of betrayal in courtrooms now trembled under the waves of labor. Yet in her heart there was only fierce resolve. This moment was not about Ethan Carlisle, not about the empire that had crumbled. It was about the new life she had chosen to protect the new world she would give her children. Maya sat beside her, clutching Amara's hand, whispering encouragement between contractions. "You're almost there," she murmured, her dark eyes bright with unshed tears. "They're almost here." Amara's lips curved faintly, though her breath came ragged. "They've been my strength, Maya, through every headline, every courtroom, every sleepless night. Tonight they'll be my reason." The room filled with quiet urgency as nurses moved gracefully, adjusting monitors, preparing instruments. Dr. Elizabeth Crane entered, her calm presence a balm against the tension. "Amara," she said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's time." The hours that followed blurred into a rhythm of pain and determination. Sweat beaded on Amara's brow, her body racked with effort, but her spirit never wavered. She thought of her mother Lorraine, who had carried her through hardship with nothing but grit and love. She thought of the legacy she wished to leave, not in towering buildings of glass and steel, but in the lives of the two children who would bear her name. Then at last the cry of a newborn broke through the silence, pure and piercing, filling the room with a sound that seemed to wash away every shadow of the past. Tears spilled freely down Amara's cheeks as Dr. Crane lifted a small, wriggling boy into her arms. His skin was warm against her chest, his tiny fists curling as though already grasping for the world. "Hello, Malik," she whispered, her voice breaking with wonder. "Welcome home, my love." Moments later, the second cry followed, softer but no less powerful. Another son, his features delicate, his breath strong and steady. When he was placed beside his brother, Amara's arms encircled them both, her heart expanding beyond what she had thought possible. "And you," she breathed, pressing her lips gently to his forehead, "you are Isaiah, my light, my promise." The twins nestled against her, their cries fading into soft whimpers, as though they already knew they were safe. Amara closed her eyes, inhaling their warmth, her soul awash in a love so profound it silenced every echo of betrayal. Maya wiped her own tears discreetly, whispering, "They're perfect." Amara opened her eyes, gazing down at the tiny faces that mirrored parts of her own. "They'll never carry the Carlisle name," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tears. "They are Johnsons. They will know where they come from, and they will never doubt their worth." Outside the hospital, reporters clamored for a statement, their cameras poised to capture the first glimpse of the woman who had shaken Manhattan to its core. But inside, Amara shut the world out. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to rest cocooned in the pure, unfiltered love of her sons. The legal war would continue. The whispers of society would not quiet overnight. But in this moment, none of it mattered. Malik and Isaiah were her victory, her rebirth, her unshakable foundation. Later that evening, as snowflakes danced against the hospital windows, Amara whispered promises to her sons. She told them of the life she would build, a life filled with dignity, truth, and love. She told them of the strength they would inherit, not through wealth or status, but through the resilience that ran in their blood. "You are my legacy," she whispered, her lips brushing their soft hair. "Not buildings, not headlines. You. And I will spend the rest of my days showing you that love and honor are stronger than betrayal." As the twins drifted into sleep, their tiny breasts rising and falling against her chest, Amara gazed at the snow-blanketed city beyond the glass. For the first time in a long while, the skyline did not remind her of Ethan Carlisle. It was no longer his empire. It was hers, a canvas waiting for her hand, a future waiting for her touch. And with Malik and Isaiah in her arms, she knew she had already begun to build it. 5 years later, the skyline of Manhattan shimmered under the glow of the setting sun. Towers of glass and steel reflected streaks of amber and violet, the city's pulse steady and unstoppable. But within those towers, whispers carried a new name, one spoken with reverence, admiration, and awe. Amara Johnson. She stood on the balcony of her new office, the flagship headquarters of Johnson Urban Design, her eyes surveying the city she had once feared she would lose. Now her designs define its future. Buildings she had envisioned, structures breathing with green terraces, walls that absorbed sunlight and returned it as energy-open plazas where art and community converged, rose proudly against the skyline. Each was a living testament to resilience and to a woman who refused to be silenced. Inside magazines with her image lined the shelves. Architect of the future declared time. The woman who redefined urban living was praised by Architectural Digest. She had been invited to conferences in Paris, Dubai, and Johannesburg, her work hailed as the blueprint for sustainable cities worldwide. Yet for Amara, the truest measure of her triumph waited for her at home each evening. Mom, will it make it? The call rang from the doorway. Two boys rushed in their laughter, bright as bells. Malik, bold and lively, his curls bouncing as he darted forward, carried a soccer ball under one arm. Isaiah, more reserved but equally radiant, followed close behind, a sketchbook tucked against his chest. Amara turned her face, breaking into a smile that no accolade could ever match. She knelt as the boys collided into her embrace, their small arms wrapping around her neck, their warmth steady against her. "You're early," she teased gently, brushing a curl from Malik's forehead. "Coach ended practice early," Malik announced proudly. "And Isaiah wanted to show you his drawing." Isaiah's dark eyes shone as he held out the sketchbook. On the page, a rough but ambitious drawing sprawled a tall building with gardens spiraling up its sides, crowned with a dome of glass that seemed to catch the sun. "It's beautiful," Amara whispered, tracing the lines with her fingertip. "You've inherited the fire, Isaiah." He smiled shyly. "I want to build a place where kids can play inside when it's raining. With plants and light, it never feels sad." Amara's heart swelled. "And you will. Both of you will build whatever dreams your hearts imagine." They spent the evening together in her office, Malik kicking his soccer ball softly against the wall, while Isaiah sketched beside her. As she worked on finalizing a design for a children's hospital in Lagos, she glanced at them, often marveling at how much strength they had given her. Yet beneath her joy, Amara carried scars invisible to the world. At night when the city quieted, memories of Ethan sometimes surfaced, his smirk, his betrayal, the sharp sting of humiliation at the gala. But the memories no longer ruled her. They had become shadows in a room filled with light. Ethan Carlisle, once the Golden Prince of Manhattan, had long since fallen. His empire lay in ruins, his name a cautionary tale whispered among financiers. Rumors swirled of lawsuits, debts, and failed ventures. Amara never sought details. She did not need to. The silence of his absence was enough. Vivian Carlisle, stripped of influence, had retreated from society altogether. The world had forgotten her just as it had forgotten her son. But Amara's life was not built on forgetting. It was built on remembering every sacrifice, every trial, every tear, and transforming them into something luminous. Later that night, as she tucked Malik and Isaiah into bed, she lingered to watch them sleep. Their breaths rose and fell in unison, their small bodies curled in innocence, untouched by the cruelty she had endured. She brushed a kiss to each forehead, whispering promises they could not yet hear. "You will never live in anyone's shadow. You will grow in the light we've created together." Then, stepping onto her apartment balcony, she gazed at the city spread out like a constellation. The cool night air caressed her face, carrying with it the faint sound of distant laughter and the hum of life below. For the first time in years, she felt entirely at peace. The ashes of her past had not buried her. They had nourished the soil from which she rose. And standing tall above the city that once judged her, Amara Johnson knew she had become not only the architect of skylines, but the architect of her own destiny. And though her story had been born in betrayal, it now blossomed in triumph. The ballroom of the Children's Heart Foundation glimmered like a sea of light, the chandeliers spilling a golden warmth across polished marble floors. It was an evening dedicated to Hope, an annual gala to raise funds for life-saving surgeries for children who otherwise would have none. The air carried the scent of roses and the soft strains of a string quartet, mingling with the low hum of conversation. Amara Johnson stood near a towering arrangement of white lilies, her emerald gown replaced tonight by deep sapphire silk that embraced her figure with understated elegance. She had grown accustomed to such evenings gatherings where society now looked at her not with curiosity, but with admiration. Yet tonight felt different. There was a stirring in the air she could not name, a quiet pulse of possibility. Malik and Isaiah clung to either side of her, dressed smartly in little black suits, their shoes polished until they shone. At 9 years old, they were handsome reflections of her spirit. Malik with his mischievous grin, Isaiah with his thoughtful gaze. The boys had begged to attend, insisting they wanted to see the world their mother worked so hard to change. Mom, Malik whispered, tugging her hand. That man's looking at you. Amara followed his subtle glance across the room. There near the silent auction table stood a man she did not recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hair the color of sun-warmed wheat, and eyes a striking shade of gray-blue, he wore his tuxedo with effortless grace. Yet it wasn't his appearance that caught her breath. It was the way his gaze held hers. Not in the appraisal, not in judgment, but with a quiet, steady recognition, as though he had been waiting for this very moment. When their eyes met, a smile curved his lips. Warm, genuine, almost disarming. Isaiah leaned close, whispering, "He doesn't look like the others. He looks kind." Amara's heart fluttered at her son's words. She forced a gentle smile. "Not everyone here is what they seem, Isaiah. But perhaps—" "You're right." Moments later, the man approached. His presence seemed to still the air around him, not through command, but through the quiet gravity he carried. "Amara Johnson," he said, his voice low and smooth, with the faintest hint of wonder, as though speaking her name carried unexpected meaning. "I've admired your work for years. I'm Nathaniel Reed." Dr. Reed Maya had mentioned his name once, a renowned pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon whose hands had saved countless lives. He extended his hand, and when she placed hers in his, she was struck not by the strength of his grip, but by its gentleness. "Your designs for the Children's Hospital in Nairobi," he continued, his smile deepening. "They've changed everything. To see spaces filled with light and gardens instead of sterile walls. Amara, you gave those children dignity." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. Praise was nothing new. She had been called brilliant, visionary, and revolutionary. But never before had someone spoken of her work with such reverence, as though it were not architecture, but an act of love. Malik grinned mischievously. "He talks like you, Mom." Nathaniel's eyes softened as he looked at the boys. "And these must be your sons." "Yes," Amara said, her voice quiet but steady. "This is Malik and Isaiah." Nathaniel crouched slightly, meeting the boys at their level. "It's good to meet you both. I hear you've inherited your mother's brilliance." Isaiah flushed, clutching his sketchbook. Malik puffed up proudly. "I'm going to be a soccer star," he declared. Nathaniel chuckled. "Then I'll make sure the hospitals I design have big enough courtyards for you to play in." The boys laughed, and Amara's heart shifted in a way she hadn't expected. For years, her world had been carefully guarded, a fortress, built to protect her children and her soul. And yet here was a man who stepped into it with no intention of taking, only of giving. Later that evening, as the orchestra began a waltz, Nathaniel extended his hand toward her once more. "May I?" Amara hesitated. It had been years since she'd allowed herself the vulnerability of a dance, years since she had let another man touch her hand without the weight of memory pressing between them. Yet the quiet trust in Nathaniel's eyes dissolved her resistance. She placed her hand in his. On the dance floor, beneath the golden glow of chandeliers, they moved together in graceful rhythm. Nathaniel guided her with the ease of a man who listened as much as he let his touch steady his steps, respectful. For the first time in so long, Amara felt the tension in her shoulders ease, replaced by something she thought she had lost forever, the whisper of possibility. When the music slowed, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. You deserve more than surviving, Amara. You deserve to live. Her breath caught tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. She met his gaze, searching for the shadow of arrogance she had learned to fear, but found only sincerity. In that moment, she realized she had not simply met a man. She had encountered a connection unexpected, uninvited, yet impossibly right. And as the night drew on, Amara Johnson knew her carefully rebuilt world had just begun to open to something new. The weeks after the gala unfolded like a gentle awakening. For Amara, life had always been measured in blueprints and deadlines in hearings and press conferences. Yet now there was something new woven between the hours, an unexpected warmth that seemed to settle over her days like sunlight through a window. Nathaniel Reed did not rush her. He never demanded her time, never sought to overwhelm her carefully ordered life. Instead, he appeared in quiet, steady ways, a message asking how the boys' soccer game had gone, a note of congratulations when her latest project broke ground in Cape Town, a bouquet of tulips left anonymously at her office, though she knew whose hands had placed them there. Malik, bold as ever, wasted no time in declaring Nathaniel approved. Isaiah was slower to trust his eyes, often studying the doctor with cautious curiosity. Yet one evening when Nathaniel joined them for dinner at Amara's apartment, she watched her reserved son lean in as Nathaniel explained how a heart could be mended with skillful hands. By the time dessert was served, Isaiah had drawn a sketch of a hospital shaped like an open heart and slid it shyly across the table. Nathaniel had accepted the sketch as though it were a priceless treasure. One day he said softly, "I'd like to help you build this." That night, Amara tucked her sons into bed and lingered in the doorway, her eyes glistening. It had been so long since she had seen that light in Isaiah's face, the quiet certainty that dreams could be safe. Later on the balcony, Nathaniel joined her. The city sprawled beneath them, a constellation of light and motion. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cool breeze, but he did not offer his jacket, nor did he step too close. Instead, he simply asked, "Do you ever feel you've been holding your breath for years?" She turned toward him, startled by how deeply the question pierced her. "Yes," she whispered. "Every day since the night I heard my husband plotting to humiliate me. Even now, I breathe, but I'm not sure I've let go of the weight." Nathaniel's gaze was steady, unflinching, yet gentle. "You don't have to let go all at once. Sometimes trust comes back the way the dawn does, slowly, almost unnoticed, until suddenly the world is bright again." His words sank into her not as persuasion, but as truth. For years, she had armored herself, convinced that vulnerability was weakness, that love was a battlefield she could never afford to step onto again. Yet with him, the armor felt less like protection and more like a cage. They stood in silence for a long moment, the city humming below the stars faint above. Finally, Amara spoke, her voice barely more than a breath. "I'm afraid, Nathaniel, afraid that if I let someone close, I'll lose myself again." "You won't lose yourself," he said softly. "Not to me. I don't want to take from you, Amara. I want to stand beside you, to learn the rhythm of your steps, to share the weight you shouldn't have had to carry alone." Her chest tightened, tears stinging her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not Ethan, not anyone. For so long, love had been a transaction, a stage upon which she was expected to perform. But here was a man offering not a spotlight, but shelter. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. His fingers closed gently around hers, warm and steady. No urgency, no demand, just the quiet promise of presence. The next weekend, he joined her and the boys for an afternoon at Central Park. Malik raced ahead with his soccer ball, challenging Nathaniel to keep up. Isaiah clung to Amara's side, at first sketchbook in hand, until Nathaniel bent down to ask about his latest drawing. Soon the boy was explaining his designs with animated gestures, his shyness melting like frost under the morning sun. Amara watched from a few steps away, her heart full and aching all at once. The sight of her sons laughing so freely of Nathaniel, listening with such sincere attention, was more powerful than any award, any triumph. She had not realized until now how much they had needed this, how much she had needed this. That evening, after the boys had fallen asleep, Amara walked Nathaniel to the door. They lingered, neither willing to end the moment. The hall light cast a soft glow over his features, the kind of light that turned edges into warmth. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For giving them this day. For giving me this peace." He reached up, brushing a stray curl from her cheek, his touch tender. "It's only the beginning, Amara." Her breath trembled, but she didn't pull away. For the first time since her heart had been broken, she allowed the possibility of love to rest in her chest, not as a threat, but as a gift. And in that quiet hallway, under the simple glow of a light that seemed to shine just for them, Amara Johnson realized she had begun to dance again, not on a grand stage, but in the fragile, exquisite steps of trust. The seasons turned with quiet grace, and with them, Amara's world began to change in ways she had once thought impossible. What began as cautious evenings shared with Nathaniel grew into a rhythm of life, a cadence as natural as breathing. He did not storm into their lives. He arrived gently like the morning sun easing through drawn curtains. Some nights he joined them for dinner after long hours at the hospital, still wearing his scrubs, his hair a little tousled, his smile warm. Other times he appeared on weekends, sleeves rolled up, ready to cheer Malik at his soccer matches, or to help Isaiah measure lines for his latest architectural sketch. Amara watched the boys with him, and slowly the walls she had built around her heart softened. Malik, ever daring, would race ahead shouting, "Come on, Dr. Reed, you're too slow," while Isaiah, quieter but no less devoted, often sat beside Nathaniel, with pencils spread out listening as he explained the beauty of a human heart, how it worked tirelessly, how it endured. One autumn evening, as golden leaves danced through Central Park, Amara caught sight of Nathaniel crouched beside Isaiah, helping him adjust a ruler on his drawing. Malik darted around them with his soccer ball, his laughter carrying through the crisp air. Nathaniel looked up, just then his eyes meeting hers across the field. And in that fleeting glance, she saw the truth: he was not merely fitting into their lives. He was becoming part of them. Later, as they walked home beneath a sky streaked with twilight, Isaiah slipped his small hand into Nathaniel's without hesitation. Amara's heart swelled her throat, tightening with emotions too deep for words. That night, after the boys had fallen asleep, Nathaniel lingered at the door. "They trust me," he said softly, almost as if he feared breaking the fragile magic of the moment. Amara nodded, her smile touched with tenderness. "They do, and so do I." The words felt like a vow. Months passed, and the bond between them deepened. Nathaniel was there when Malik scored his first goal in a championship game, his voice rising proudly above the crowd. He was there when Isaiah unveiled a model of his first imagined skyscraper, kneeling to admire it as though it were already built on the skyline. He was there in the quiet evenings when Amara returned from long days of work, the exhaustion etched into her features, eased by the warmth of his embrace. But perhaps the moment Amara knew her heart had truly opened came one stormy night. Malik had woken with a fever, his forehead burning, his small body trembling. Panic stirred in Amara's chest as memories of loss and vulnerability threatened to overwhelm her. Yet Nathaniel was at her side in minutes, his presence calm and sure. He examined Malik with gentle hands, his voice steady, as he assured her it was only a viral infection, nothing more. "You're safe, Malik," Nathaniel murmured, adjusting the boy's blanket. "Your mom's right here, and so am I." Amara stood nearby, tears gathering in her eyes. Watching him care for her son with such quiet devotion unraveled the last remnants of her fear. For the first time since betrayal had shattered her world, she realized she was no longer carrying the burden alone. Weeks later, as winter melted into spring, the four of them sat on the balcony of Amara's apartment, the city glowing beneath them. Isaiah leaned against Nathaniel, pointing out constellations, while Malik sprawled across Amara's lap, recounting the details of his soccer game in excited bursts. The night was filled with laughter, warmth, and the steady hum of a life remade. Nathaniel glanced at Amara. Then his eyes filled with a question he didn't voice aloud, as though to ask, "Is this truly real? Do you feel it too?" Her answering smile was enough. In that moment, Amara understood they were no longer fragments of separate lives trying to piece together a future. They were a family not by blood alone, but by love choice. and the unwavering trust they had built together. The skyline stretched before them, radiant and alive, a mirror of all she had endured and all she had gained. For years, Amara had stood alone, building a world for her sons, with hands that never trembled. But now she no longer stood alone. Nathaniel Reed had stepped into their story not to replace what was lost, but to create something new, something whole, something beautiful. And together they were beginning to build not just a family, but a future filled with love that would not falter. Spring had returned to Manhattan, dressing the city in soft blossoms and tender breezes. The trees along the avenues bloomed with delicate pinks and whites scattering petals that danced in the wind like blessings. In Amara's home, sunlight poured through the tall windows, filling the rooms with warmth. It was a Sunday morning, quiet and ordinary, or so she believed. Amara moved through the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast for Malik and Isaiah. The twins, now nearly 11, were unusually secretive, whispering to each other and darting from room to room with conspiratorial glances. She raised a brow, amused. "What are you two plotting?" she teased, flipping pancakes onto their plates. Malik grinned, dimples flashing. "You'll see, Mom." Isaiah, ever the careful one, pressed a finger to his lips. "It's a surprise." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "As long as it doesn't involve soccer balls flying through my living room again." The boys exchanged glances but said nothing, their excitement barely contained. It wasn't until later, when Nathaniel arrived, that the truth began to unfold. He stepped into the apartment carrying a bouquet of lilies, her favorite, their fragrance filling the air. His suit was simple but elegant, his eyes luminous as they found hers. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, as though the words were meant only for her. Amara felt her pulse quicken, though she brushed it aside with a smile. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." The boys tugged at his sleeves, urging him toward the living room. Amara followed, curiosity rising with each step. When she entered, she stopped, her breath catching. The room had been transformed. The coffee table was covered with candles, their soft glow reflecting in the glass windows. On the wall, Malik and Isaiah had hung a collage. They had made photographs of their life together over the years. Images of Malik scoring goals, Isaiah presenting his sketches, family outings in Central Park, and quiet dinners where laughter had filled the air. And in the center of it all, a picture of the four of them, taken only weeks ago, their smiles bright and unguarded. Her eyes stung as she turned toward Nathaniel. He stood before her now, the boys on either side, each holding a corner of a small velvet box. "Mom," Malik said, his voice unusually soft, "we helped with this." Isaiah looked up at her, his dark eyes shimmering. "Because we want him to stay. Forever." Amara's breath trembled, her hand flying to her mouth as Nathaniel knelt before her. He took the box from the boys and opened it, revealing a ring simple yet exquisite, an oval diamond, set in a delicate band of gold, elegant without ostentation. Amara, Nathaniel began, his voice low but steady. "From the moment I met you, I knew you were unlike anyone I had ever known. You've built beauty from brokenness, strength from sorrow. You've shown Malik and Isaiah what love truly looks like, unwavering, fierce, and endless. And you've shown me the kind of woman I could only hope to share my life with." Tears blurred her vision as he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't want to just love you. I want to build with you, to walk beside you, to raise these incredible boys with you, not as a visitor in their lives, but as a father. If you'll let me, I want to make us a family in every way that matters." Isaiah clutched her hand, then his voice breaking. "Say yes, Mom." Malik leaned against her side, grinning through his tears. "Please, Mom. We already love him." Amara's chest tightened, her heart overflowing as she looked at the three faces before her, two she had carried within her, one she had never expected to find, yet had somehow been given. She sank to her knees, level with Nathaniel, her tears falling freely now. "You already are their father," she whispered, "and you already are my home." Nathaniel slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling only slightly. She leaned forward, and their lips met, not with the urgency of passion, but with the deep, unshakable tenderness of two souls finally finding their place. The boys clapped and cheered Malik, jumping onto Nathaniel's back, while Isaiah threw his arms around Amara. Laughter filled the room, mingling with tears with joy, with the fragile beauty of promises made. That evening, as the candles burned low and the boys finally drifted to sleep, Amara stood on the balcony with Nathaniel beside her. The city stretched before them, vibrant and alive, the same city that had once watched her fall, now bearing witness to her rise. "You know," she said softly, twining her fingers with his, "I never thought I'd have this again. Not love, not trust, not a future." Nathaniel kissed her temple, his voice steady against her ear. "You didn't just find a future, Amara. You built it. And now, we'll build it together." For the first time in years, she let herself believe. Not in survival, not in strength alone, but in love that healed love, that stayed love, that transformed a fractured life into a family. And beneath the stars above Manhattan, Amara Johnson said yes not only to a man, but to a life she had once thought impossible. The years that followed unfolded like a symphony, each movement more triumphant than the last. The morning sun spilled across the vast terrace of the Reed Foundation's headquarters, a building Amara herself had designed. Its glass walls reflected the city's skyline, while rooftop gardens overflowed with vibrant greenery, a symbol of renewal and purpose. Inside, the hum of purposeful activity filled the air, doctors, architects, and volunteers working side by side to build a better world. Amara Reed, her new name, a testament to love chosen and shared, stood in the atrium watching a group of children chase one another across the indoor courtyard she had insisted on including in the design. Their laughter rang like bells, echoing through the soaring space. It was the sound of hope made tangible. Beside her, Nathaniel adjusted his cufflinks, his white coat draped over his arm. Though his schedule as a renowned surgeon remained demanding, he had made the foundation as much his mission as the hospital. "They'll never know," he said softly, "how much of yourself you poured into this." Amara smiled, her hand brushing his. "That's the point, isn't it? For them to never need to know the weight it took to make it possible." The Reed Foundation had grown into an international force for good, constructing sustainable hospitals across continents, each designed with the same philosophy Amara had carried since her first blueprint: dignity, light, and life in every brick and window. Their projects stretched from the crowded streets of Mumbai to the sun-scorched villages of Kenya, changing lives on scales she once only dreamed of. At home, Malik and Isaiah had grown into young men, their paths already unfolding with promise. Malik, bold and full of fire, was climbing the ranks of his school's soccer team scouts, whispering about his future. Isaiah, thoughtful and steady, was preparing portfolios for admission to architecture school, his sketches carrying the same spark that had once ignited his mother's rise. Yet no matter how the world celebrated their work, the heart of their lives remained in the small, ordinary moments: family dinners filled with laughter, late-night homework sessions at the kitchen table, quiet walks through the park where Nathaniel held Amara's hand as though he might never let go. But the world did not forget Ethan Carlisle. One morning, as Amara poured tea in her sunlit kitchen, the news played softly on the television in the corner. Ethan's face appeared on the screen, older now, the arrogance gone from his eyes. The anchor's voice carried words that no longer stung, but resonated with quiet finality. Former real estate magnate Ethan Carlisle, sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. Malik, seated at the counter, glanced at the screen. "Do you want me to turn it off, Mom?" Amara shook her head, her gaze steady. "No, let it play." She listened in silence, then turned to her sons, her voice calm. "Remember this, both of you. Power built on lies always crumbles, but the truth, it builds things that last." They nodded, their eyes filled with understanding beyond their years. That evening, she stood with Nathaniel at a gala celebrating the opening of the Reed Foundation's newest hospital in Rio de Janeiro. The hall glowed with candlelight, the air rich with music and anticipation. World leaders, philanthropists, and visionaries filled the room, but all eyes turned to Amara as she stepped onto the stage. Her speech was not about her struggles, nor about the man who had tried to destroy her. It was about the children who would live to see futures once denied to them, about communities that would thrive where despair had lingered. It was about building not monuments to ego, but sanctuaries of healing and hope. As she spoke, Nathaniel watched her with pride so deep it brought tears to his eyes. Malik and Isaiah, seated in the front row, leaned forward, their faces alight with admiration. When the applause thundered through the hall, Amara closed her eyes briefly, letting it wash over her. Not as validation, she no longer needed that, but as a reminder of how far she had come. From betrayal to rebirth, from ashes to triumph, she had risen. Not alone, but with love by her side, and two sons who embodied every reason she had ever fought to survive. Later on the balcony overlooking the glittering city, Nathaniel wrapped his arms around her, his lips brushing her temple. "You've become what you were always meant to be," he whispered. "Not just an architect of cities, Amara, but of lives." She turned in his embrace, her smile soft and luminous. "And you, Nathaniel, you've given me a home in my own heart again." Below them, the city glowed like a constellation of promises kept. It was not revenge that had brought her to this pinnacle. It was love, resilience, and the unshakable belief that no darkness could silence a woman who refused to stop building. And with Nathaniel and her sons beside her, Amara knew she was only at the beginning of a legacy that would outlast them all. The evening sky over Manhattan shimmered with 1,000 lights as though the city itself bowed in honor of the woman it once sought to break. Inside the grand ballroom of the Reed Foundation's 10th anniversary gala, crystal chandeliers spilled golden light across a sea of distinguished guest leaders, innovators and dreamers from every corner of the world. The air was alive with music, laughter, and the quiet hum of admiration directed toward the woman at the heart of it all. Amara Reed stood near the center of the hall, radiant in a gown of ivory silk that flowed like moonlight. The years had only deepened her beauty, etching grace and strength into every line of her face. At her side, Nathaniel watched her with the quiet devotion of a man who knew he had found the rarest treasure. Their sons, now on the cusp of manhood, stood proudly behind them, Malik tall and confident, Isaiah calm and contemplative, both reflections of her strength and spirit. As the music faded, the host of the evening introduced Amara. Applause filled the room as she stepped onto the stage, her heart steady, her soul serene. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the audience, and then began, her voice as smooth and commanding as a symphony. "10 years ago, I stood at a crossroads," she said softly. "The world saw me as a woman betrayed, a woman broken. But I was not broken. I was being remade." The room fell utterly silent, her words wrapping themselves around every heart. "In those years, I learned that the greatest revenge is not destruction. It is creation. It is building a life so full of love, so rich in meaning, that the pain of the past becomes nothing more than the soil from which your future grows." She spoke of the hospitals the Reed Foundation had built, sanctuaries filled with gardens, and light where children healed not only in body, but in spirit. She spoke of her sons Malik and Isaiah, who had grown into young men unafraid to dream boldly, to live with courage and kindness. She spoke of Nathaniel, whose steady love had taught her that trust could be reborn even after betrayal had scorched the earth of her heart. And so she concluded, her smile luminous. "This is the truth I offer you tonight. Live beautifully. Not for revenge, not for validation, but because the world needs the light only you can give. That is the greatest victory any of us can claim." Thunderous applause rose, filling the hall, a wave of admiration so profound it seemed to lift her from the stage. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to feel the fullness of it, not as triumph over Ethan Carlisle, whose name was now nothing more than a faded shadow, but as a celebration of all she had become. Later that evening, on the balcony overlooking the glittering city, Amara stood with Nathaniel's arms encircling her waist. Malik and Isaiah laughed nearby, their voices carrying like music through the cool night air. She leaned against Nathaniel's chest, her heart steady. "You've given them the world," Nathaniel murmured. Amara shook her head gently, her eyes fixed on her sons. "No, we built it together, and they will build even more." Nathaniel pressed a kiss to her temple, his breath warm against her skin. "And you, my love, you've shown the world that the most radiant kind of revenge is not bitterness, but joy." She smiled, her gaze lifting toward the endless sky. No, she whispered, her voice filled with quiet triumph. The most radiant revenge is living beautifully. The city stretched out before her, no longer a battlefield, but a canvas alive with possibility. And as the night wrapped its arms around her family, Amara knew that her story was not ending, but only beginning again. In every life her work would touch, in every dream her sons would carry forward, in every moment she chose to love without fear. For she had proven what the world had doubted, that no betrayal, no cruelty, no darkness could ever extinguish the light of a woman who chose to rise. My friends, if Amara's journey has touched your heart, let her story remind you that no matter what trials you face, you too can rise, rebuild, and live beautifully. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, remember to like and follow so we can continue to walk through more stories of courage, resilience, and love together.